For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future.
All right, college savings. Wow. Oh my goodness gracious. It's Managing Your Financial Future. We're going to talk about college today and the various college savings plans. I'm your host, podcast host, Johnny Dean, here with certified financial planner professional and accredited wealth management advisor, Rick Plum. I'm going to say this right at the top, Professor Plum. There are a few reasons I'm really happy that I was born when I was, and you should be too. One of them is that I was able to afford a house in California during the 1980s. A starter home, like $75,000, I think it was in 1977, or 87 rather. That was one. And number two, I was able to go to college, and it was fairly reasonably priced when I did. My folks.
And you went to a big name college.
I went to UCLA, yeah, which is a pretty big name college, and I was in-state, so of course that helped. But you and I both went to California in-state schools, both funded primarily by the wonderful taxpayers of the state of California, for which we have to write thank you notes every single year until we're 80.
Well, as long as but the thank you notes we're writing now are in the form of tax payments.
Well, states don't fund nearly as much of state college education as they used to. I think most of the burden is now on the students or the parents or whoever. But I want to talk about this idea of saving for college and ways to do it. And this stems from an article that I found just a couple of days ago. I think it was from this week in the New York Times. Which talked about the 529 college savings plan. And for those who don't know, we'll explain what those are in just a moment here. But the 529 college savings plan, which has been around for, goodness, how long? 30 years, maybe more? Something like that?
They've been around long enough. I don't remember when they started.
Yeah, I don't either, but I know we've been talking about them for at least the last 25 years, something like that. So they've been around a long time. 1996. Look at that. I said 30 years. We were real close to that. So we'll have you explain it in just a moment here, Professor Plum. But as far as people investing in them goes, they're becoming less popular, according to this New York Times article. And it says, while 65% of parents and parents-to-be are saving for their children's future using a savings account, fewer than a quarter are using a 529 plan, according to data provided by the Harris Poll and Intuit Credit Karma. Among those who have used a 529 plan, 19% have closed it early, and another 22% have considered doing so. And they give a bunch of reasons why. Tuition costs keep climbing. Okay, that's probably true. Student loan debt continues to weigh. I mean, if you're borrowing, that one doesn't really make sense. I mean, the
idea that student debt is ballooning would mean that you would want to actually save for college, not stop saving for college.
Yeah, and which it is, no doubt. But anyway, okay, that was one of the reasons. And they said, and this is I agree with, a degree does not always guarantee a stable job or any job after graduation. This, of course, is true.
An interesting point to that, with the new, whatever you want to call it, OBBBBBBBB, or the OB3, or whatever you want to call the tax bill that passed recently, there were some changes to the educational issues, and a lot of it had to do with student loans, and there's lifetime limits coming in play now on what you can borrow. But there's new provisions that put a lot of accountability on the school, and that they have to now keep records of when somebody graduates from your school and they get their job. Is that job paying more than what a high school equivalency would get? If it doesn't, they risk losing federal funding. They have to then also keep track of what their graduates are earning, at least in the first couple of years out of college, and post that information for new people to say, well, why am I spending this money? So they're trying to make it more, I guess, transparent to say, is going to college really going to make my life better.
Well, good luck enforcing all of that.
Well, I mean, but that's part of the bill. It's how they're going to enforce it. We were talking about this morning.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. But at least there is the thought process that we're not going to let you borrow, $300,000-$400,000 to get a basket weaving degree that will never allow you to pay back that loan.
Well, and here's the thing, though. I mean, it used to be if you wanted a basket weaving degree or a degree in philosophy, which my father got when he went to school in the 1820s or whatever it was. Sorry, Dad, I'm kidding. You at least could do it. There was some merit to it, but I won't really get into that part of it so much.
Well, and you're still able to get those degrees. You just won't be able to get student loans of significant student loans that won't ever be able to be paid back by a job that you can get with that degree.
Yeah, there are all kinds of problems with that. It's just
anything the government does, you're going to find problems one side or the other.
So 529 plans, they are less popular now. First of all, Professor, please, if you would, so people who don't know 529, many of them do, some of them don't, just give us the nutshell version of what a 529 college savings plan is.
Well, actually, a 529 plan is a state-sponsored, tax-deferred savings vehicle specific for education. Now, when they first came out almost 30 years ago, they were purely for higher education after high school. Over the years, they've become more available. They've expanded the definition of the expenses that are eligible for deductions. And in this latest set of go-rounds, either between Secure Act 2.0, and or the OBBB or OB3, whatever you want to call it, they've opened up the ability to do more expenses that are coming out of the 529s on a tax-free basis. So the idea is you put money into these accounts. They're state-sponsored, so each state offers at least one, sometimes multiple vendors for this 529 plan. You put the money in. There is no deduction from the federal side to put money in. Some, not many, but some states offer tax incentives for residents of that state, obviously, to put money into the 529 plan. So you might get a tax deduction at the state level. Not all that many states do it, but there are some that do. And then the money's in there, and it grows tax deferred. So whatever you've invested in, you don't pay any taxes on until such time as you take the money out. Now, if you take the money out in the year where you had qualified expenses, then you can have the income that comes out of that 529 plan be tax-free if you're using it for qualified higher education, or if you're using it for qualified expenses. And that can be a trade school now. It doesn't have to be college. It doesn't have to be K through 12. And now it's books and other things too. So they've expanded the definition quite a lot. But it's basically a way to put money in, let it grow, tax deferred, and if used for education, it's tax free.
Yeah.
Now, for a long time, we didn't want to overfund. And that was part of the problem because, if you're looking at a 3, 4, 5-year-old, you have no idea what they're going to go to school for, if they're going to go to school, and what they're going to go to school for, or how expensive the school is that they're going to go to. And so you didn't want to overfund it because if you had money left in the 529 after the child had finished school and there were no other children in the family that you could ping pong the money back and forth to, once money's left in the 529, it was a problem because taking it out, any tax-deferred earnings that come out at that point, not used for qualified higher education, or that's just a phrase I drilled into my head years ago, for qualified tuition education expenses. It came out taxable as ordinary income and subject to a penalty. Now, Secure Act 2.0 said, well, if there's up to about $35,000 in the plan, if the plan's been around for 15 years, same owner or same beneficiary, that beneficiary, assuming they qualify for a Roth IRA, can use this money tax-free to go as their funding source for their Roth IRA for several years to a lifetime limit of $35,000. Currently, the max contribution to a Roth IRA is $7,000, and so it would take them 5 years to take the money out of the 529 and move it to a Roth. Yeah. But that became nice. So now we didn't have to be as close. And so if we went over a little bit, fine, we can educate and we can have a little bit left over, get the kids started on something else. 5 years funding also helps towards a first-time home purchase because if you have a Roth IRA for at least 5 years, and Then you've got some options for first-time home purchase that come in real handy. So that was a very nice little thing they gave us a couple years back. But basically, it's a tax-deferred, potentially tax-free educational savings account.
Yeah.
It's kind of, but it is limited to the state offerings. They're all mutual fund based. So if you have a favorite mutual fund company, find out what state that company uses or uses them as a 529 vendor, and you'd be able to use that mutual fund company assuming they're involved in the 529 world. So in addition to the 529s, there was a Coverdell savings account. Now, when it first came out, it was called the Coverdell IRA, but got misconstrued a lot. So it's Coverdell savings account. This one is federally run. It is a specific type of an account that you open at a brokerage firm or wherever. The problem is the limit is only $2,000 a year that you can put in per child, but you have total flexibility on investment options. You can be as aggressive or conservative, individual stocks, bonds. You can use mutual funds. You can do anything you want in them, but they're more restrictive on the backside, and they don't last forever. And at some point, you're going to take the money out and pay penalties if you didn't use it for education. But those are the two basic savings accounts that are specific to education spending. That doesn't mean that they're best way to do it. That just means those are the two that are available specific to education.
Best, of course, is subjective, and I looked at 520. I've looked at 529 plans. I've used one. It wasn't a ton of money, but it was something. I've used them, but I'm not a fan of 529 college savings plans, mainly because the real redeeming feature of it is that if you use it for those qualified education expenses, it's tax free, and that's a good thing, and that's really, to me, the only true benefit of it. But
that also means you don't want to start it when the kid's 16 or 17 because it's just not going to grow that much. You really want to start these when the kid's 1, 2, 3. So it gives you 14, 15, 16, up to 18 or more maybe years of growth that you can get out tax free.
Well, that's why I'm not. That's why I haven't up until they changed the law a few years ago to put it into a Roth, which helps. But that's why, because most people, from my experience, are saving a certain amount every year between ages, maybe 3, 4, all the way up to 18, if they're saving at all. But the most bang for your buck comes if you put it all in at once, I think, when the kid is a year or newborn, 2, 3 years old, and give it that 15 plus years.
Yeah, but most parents of newborns don't have the money to put it away, so they are relying on other people like grandparents, aunts, and uncles that can help fund these as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. So you see why it doesn't, to me, and then as you said before, if the kid doesn't go to college or whatever reason, you're kind of stuck in this, I've got to use it for some higher education. Now, there are limits, as you said, to that Roth conversion ability, whatever. But at least that helps. So I've never been a big fan of it, mainly for that reason. I just don't think the benefit, unless you put it all in at once early on and let it grow, is all that worth it. But that's neither here nor there. These 529 college savings plan, I mean, are they still called college savings plans? It's just a 529.
Oh, they're just called 529 plans.
529, which comes from the tax code.
IRS code.
IRS code. Yeah. They can work, but they're not as popular as they used to be. Now, the problem, I think, that people are finding with the biggest problem, of course, is the cost of college. Now, when your kids were young, well, let's say 18 years ago, the freshman, what was that, like 2007? I mean, we thought college costs were high then. But it was impossible almost to project how much anybody was going to need for just a medium-tier school. And so I just think, I don't know that it's helpful to put that much money, even if you can convert some of that to Roth, into a 529 plan.
Well, it didn't help me because I never had the cash flow when the kids were young to be able to put it into a savings account. So I paid for college, retroactively, basically. I was doing it as we, paying for it as we went. But
which is very common, by the way. That's very common, and I think that's probably at least half, if not more, of the people are doing it that way.
And it's that way by default because we didn't have another option. It wasn't that we didn't know the options of 529 or this, that, or the other thing. We didn't have the cash flow, to do it.
And the student loan option is the other one. Now they do have restrictions on those as far as what counts and how much they're going to give you and all that stuff. I know for quite a long time there were a lot of scams going on, and I mean there were some real shady characters involved in these. Well,
there were some shady, supposedly educational institutions.
Oh, please!
There was one in the building next to us where our office was for many years. That it was some kind of higher education, company, and basically nobody ever graduated from that school. I don't think anybody ever got through a class, but you signed up and you got a lot of student loan money through them. But you never went to school, and nobody ever graduated. But somehow they were some kind of education institution, and a lot of money flowed through the student loan process. And these people were left holding the bag. They didn't have a degree, they didn't have an education, but they had a loan.
Yeah, and it
had to be paid back.
Yeah. So these are issues. Now, when you're, what do you tell people that you're maybe advising on this? They have a young kid, and they want to save for their own retirement, and
they've only got so many dollars that they can afford to save, and so the first thing we look for is: are you eligible for a Roth IRA or a backdoor Roth IRA? Are you doing the Roth? Because I think, personal opinion, you mentioned it earlier. What is best? What is better? What is what? My opinion is, if you haven't already maxed out your Roth IRA, do the Roth IRA. The Roth IRAs, don't have to be used necessarily for retirement. But if your kids are going to school before you get to 59 and a half, you can still get to all the contributions that you've put in, and you can get to some of the earnings penalty free. So I mean, the Roth IRA I think is a much more flexible, much better use of the money, and it gets past the concern of what if they don't go to an expensive school, what if they don't finish, you can use it for anything else. You don't have to use it just for that. There are limits, obviously. You can't just. It's not tax-free for education unless your kids are go to school when you're 59 and a half or older. But it happens. I mean,
sure.
But it's just, I think that doing the Roth IRA helps. Now, some people have already maxed out their Roth IRAs. They're doing really good savings. They've maxed out their 401k. They've maxed out their Roth IRA. Then what's next? Well, what next comes to if you want specifics for 529 and things like that. That's where I think the 529 plan, potentially the covered education savings plan, come in, but not until after you've done your saving for your own retirement. Mm-hmm. Because if you're saving into the Roth, if you're saving into the 401k, and you're maxing those out as you go, you're developing a savings habit. Roth IRA is $7,000 right now. Whatchamacallit, 401k is $23,000. Okay, it's tax deductible. Maybe you're doing Roth 401k, but that's $30,000 a year of saving. So let's say you start doing that, and by the time you get to the kids' education, you haven't done any other education savings. Well, at that point, you can say, well, I've built up a bunch of money in Roth. I could potentially use some of that, or I could back off. I'm used to spending $7,000 per person if a married couple, $14,000. I'm used to putting $30,000+ in the 401k. I've got a lot of cash flow that I could stop funding my Roth IRA for a couple of years and let it grow on its own for a couple of years, and then fund the education out of pocket by not funding the Roth in those years, but then go back to it later on. But have that money still working for you for your retirement, rather than trying to save everything for education first, putting off retirement until the latter days, until the kids are out of school, and then you just don't have time on your hand to be able to let it grow and accumulate fast enough for retirement. There is help for education.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
There is no help for retirement.
You are 100% correct. And let's talk for just a moment here about what kind of help there is. Now, I didn't even mention this to you ahead of time, and I don't know if you need any prompting or whatever, but the there are things like the American Opportunity Credit. Now, we have not talked about these things in a long time. So
things like the American Opportunity Credit, the Lifetime Learning Credit, those are tax incentives for people who are spending money on American Opportunity specifically is for the first 4 years of college, higher education, and it helps you get a tax credit to help fund the ongoing. This is basically an after the thought. It's like, okay, I'm funding it out of pocket, and having a $2,500 up to $2,500 savings in my tax return can help. It doesn't pay for it all, but it can help.
Well, we'll take any kind of help we can get on this. Now, to come back to this this article, and I've got it here somewhere, but they were talking about people turning to different ways to fund, and I'm not going to get into too much of what one couple or a couple people.
Well, they highlighted two basic types of accounts. One was just a joint or an individually owned brokerage investment account in the parent's name.
Yeah.
So not doing a Roth and just opening an account in your name that is basically earmarked for education savings. And you don't get the tax-free component later on. But if you do it right, you can keep the taxes pretty low, especially if you're using individual stocks or low turnover ETFs or those kinds of things where you're not buying and selling, not realizing a lot of gains. And then when you ultimately have to spend the money, you realize the tax then, but if it's capital gain, it's a preferential tax treatment. But you've got more control. There's no limits. You can put in as much as you want or as little. It doesn't have to be used for education. You can use it for anything you want. You don't have to deal with filing anything, signing up for anything, dealing with anything. It's very easy, and it's not a bad way to go. And having that, it's also available. The positive and negative on this is they're available for other things as well. They're available for emergencies, and so you may end up using it for an emergency and not have it available for the education. So having that flexibility is both a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, and that's for the brokerage account. Now, the other thing that they mentioned here, and this really made me suspect, was that this person that they talked to, a Ms. Marshall, 36 years old, said after watching TikTok videos about saving strategy, she came across indexed universal life insurance, a type of life insurance, as you know, that includes a death benefit and cash value tied to a market index performance like the S&P 500. Now, Professor
Correct.
Plum, we don't talk about this kind of thing very often, but let me just ask you if you can tell me in 5 seconds, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, the way they talked about it, she was putting in $50 a month per kid. In this respect, this is a horrible, I can't stress this strong enough, stupid, idiotic, horrible idea.
All right, I that's why I said when I was going to ask you, I took my earphones out because I knew my ears would get blasted on this. So
this is the wrong way to use that type of insurance policy. These insurance policies can work, but not at $50 a month. And in fact, they even talk about it. They said after 3 years of funding it, she was very happy that each child had $1,500 earning interest growing forward for the education expenses down the line. Okay, that sounds okay, but if I'm doing $50 a month, what is that per year? 50 times 12 is $600. If I'm doing $600 a year for 3 years, how much have I put into this thing?
$1,800.
For 3 years, I put in $1,800, and it's only worth $1,500. So I could have done a lot more with that brokerage account. I could have done a lot more with a Roth IRA. I could have done a lot more. Now, universal life, index universal life, variable universal life, whatever you want to call it, whichever way you want to accept or not accept risk in your volatility portfolio, they can work. But to make them work, you got to fund the living hell out of them. You got to put in a lot more than $50 a month. So you find out what the top amount that you can put in. If you're buying $100,000 of death benefit, ask the insurance company, how much can I put into this policy without screwing up the tax benefits of this policy? And whatever that number is, if you're not hitting that, you're not using it right.
Okay, so hey, listen, we could do. I could let you talk for 20 minutes on that because not only do you know this really, really well, but you're correct. And to see these things used incorrectly can really get the blood boiling. So bottom line is to save that little amount in this type of what they call IUL, Index Universal Life, is not a good idea. And there are multiple reasons why, and you just gave us a few. So part of the problem is people are looking to other TikTok videos for their advice on what they should do, and you got to be really careful about that. Now, we don't have a lot of time left in this, Professor Plum, but if I were going to ask you, you heard my opinion on the 529 plan. Would you recommend that to people who only have, let's say they had $1,000 a year to save for college. Obviously, that's not going to get much, but let's say it's $1,000 a year, and they're going to do it over the next 18 years for their newborn child. Is this something that you would you recommend that, or would you go, say, with the Roth? What's your opinion?
Well, I would do the Roth first. I mean, I would do the Roth first every time.
If they're eligible.
Well, yeah, assuming they're eligible, yeah, I would do that. If I knew that if I knew that the kid was going to go to school, if I've already maxed out my Roth, or I'm not eligible, whatever the case, and of course, if I'm not eligible, it means I'm making pretty good money, so I should have more than $1,000 a year.
But you could be spending all your money too. We've seen that, But okay, I get it.
But I do not have a problem with the 529, assuming I've already done my Roth, my other savings, and things of that nature, and taking care of that, and I have extra money, and I want to put it towards specifically education. If I only had $1,000 a year, and I knew that the kid was going to go to school, or I was going to spend it for education, and $1,000 a year, even over 18 years, is not going to grow to huge numbers. I mean, even at 8% over 18 years, you're only going to have about $40,000 in the account if you're spending $1,000 a year. But hey, $40,000 that pays for quite a few years at a state school, maybe. I don't know what that costs anymore, or maybe 1 year. But it's not overfunding it.
Yeah.
But given the choice there with that limited savings, I'd go with the Coverdale savings, because then I could have more investment options. Now it's more controlled on the other side, and I want to make sure that I don't leave any money in it. But I like the Coverdale in that case. If I want to do more than $2,000 a year, which is the limit for the Coverdale, or I want help from other people, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and say, hey, put money in this account for your wonderful, precious little granddaughter, your grandson's education. The 529 is great for that. I love 529s, especially when they're funded by other people's money.
Yes, as mine was probably 80% for my kids. But okay, so you're not against them, but
well, it's a tool like anything else used appropriately. I like what you can get out of them, but unfortunately, they can be used inappropriately or in a wrong sequence of use.
Yeah, so be careful, and if you decide not to do the 529 plan, be careful about other advice that you might be seeing online, because a lot of it may be not good. Now, do you find that with the ability now, as I had said, to roll them into a Roth if it's unused, that's only a good thing? I can't think of anything necessarily.
Well, that's the 529, and I think that takes a lot of the problem that we've had about people not wanting to overfund them and have money left over in them. Well, if we have a little money left over, fine. This can help the child get started on their retirement or, as I mentioned, first-time home purchase after 5 years. That's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. And if you're overfunding it to a point where you're going to be way over or over $35,000 left over at the end of it, well, you're funding it too high. But then if you're funding it to go to an Ivy League school and they go to a JC, you might end up with that problem. But I think you're going to know that acumen of that child long before you overfund the living heck out of it.
Well, I'll tell you what, the junior college route to me has always been pretty good, at least maybe before you sneak into one of the larger schools. You mentioned schools. I looked up when I went to school, when I went to UCLA, and this was granted, it was 40 years ago. Tuition, room, and board was about $3,300 per year, $3,300 per year for everything.
Tuition, room, and board?
Tuition, room, and board, because it was a state school. That's how they did this. Yes, I looked it up for 1982, which was my first year. That's what it was. And just tuition was $2,100, tuition and fees. So I figure over my 4 years, I only did room and board for 1 year. I paid for my rent for the next 3 in an apartment. But I figure my parents got out of there for roughly somewhere between $12,000 and $14,000. Now, I looked at the current year tuition for that same school, wonderful school, but it is room and board and tuition was I don't have it here, $37,000 in-state. I'm talking in-state for all of this. $37,000 some odd dollars, and that doesn't count other incidentals and things like that. So I wonder, are you getting 10 times the amount of education? That is it a 10 times better quality even with inflation? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm making it sound like I wouldn't send my kids to school if they had to go in 2025. I'd have to really give it some thought, Professor. I don't have to worry about it because my kids are, of course, much older now. But,
well, I think parents need to look at what it is they expect or the kids expect to be doing. And, I think a discussion on AI is coming into this as well, because AI is going to affect white-collar jobs more than trades and what they call blue-collar jobs. And so the trades are becoming more popular again because kids can make a very good, young adults and turning into, can make a very good living doing that kind of work that doesn't necessarily require college education. And they can go straight on. I know that the people I knew that went straight into the trades out of high school, I was way behind the boat they were making a lot more money than me for a long time. And while I don't know this for a fact, I may or may not be making more money than them now, they're still probably more well off than I am because they made it early.
I know you're correct. I happen to know somebody I went to high school with who's an electrician now, or was within the last 4 years. This person was making some real serious cash because they were good at it and they had all the licenses.
They were good workers, and they started early and they got their flow going early, and they were way ahead of us.
They were. I can guarantee that. So. Yeah, it's fine. That's a good thing, though. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. So listen, just to kind of put a button on all this stuff, we've talked about. I don't want to say whether what you should do for saving for college. That's a personal decision for everybody. It's obviously a lot more tough. It's a lot tougher now than it used to be when we went to school, and it's probably going to be even tougher going forward. If you have a kid who is being born now or is relatively young and you have another 15, 16 years, you do have time to save, but who knows? And you just brought up that AI discussion, Professor Plum. I don't really know. We don't know how that's going to change all of this. So, but the important message is no matter what you do, save for your own retirement first. That, I think, is the takeaway.
Save early, save often, and then it'll all work out. That's the problem, though. You run a very fine line between saving too much early and having no life, and not saving enough and having to work longer later.
Yeah, and that's kind of always been the case. But if you need help planning all this stuff, I know you've talked to many clients who are in the same situation, and it's a good idea to talk to your financial advisors. They can give you some guidance on this kind of thing. They can tell you maybe what's a better, potentially more tax advantaged way for you to go. Give the people at Lucia Capital Group a call. The advisors there can help you out. 800-644-1150, 800-644-1150. I know we don't talk about college savings really much at all on this program, but it seemed like a good thing to mention here because this is part of many people's financial lives. They want to send their kids to college, no matter what they may be majoring in. And you know what? I mean, it's a great experience. I loved my college experience. And I don't like to think that my kids didn't necessarily experience the same thing I did because it would have been way too expensive. But anyway, include that as part of your financial plan, 800-644-1150, the number at Lucia Capital Group. You can find us online, luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. And find all kinds of blog posts and videos. I mention this all the time, but you can find our resources, download some of our guides. We've got it all right there at luciacap.com. It's all free for you to read. Subscribe to this podcast. Do so if you haven't yet done so, please. Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We always like to see that subscriber count grow. And, of course, we always like to see your interest in this program. So go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and subscribe to this podcast. Thank you, Professor Plum. I appreciate you being here. For Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional and accredited wealth management advisor, I'm your podcast host, Johnny Dean. This is Managing Your Financial Future. We will talk to you again next week. The information provided should not be considered specific, tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. These materials are provided for general information and educational purposes based upon publicly available information from sources believed to be reliable. The information in these materials may change at any time and without notice, and its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. There is no guarantee that any investment strategy will meet its stated objective. All investments involve risk, including potential loss of principal. Examples cited are hypothetical hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There's no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Earnings from a 529 college savings plan can grow tax deferred and may be withdrawn free of federal taxes when used for qualified education expenses. Non-qualified withdrawals are subject to a 10% penalty tax. Coverdell accounts can affect financial aid significantly or not at all. Withdrawals from Coverdell accounts are generally tax-free to the extent that the amount of the withdrawal is not more than the beneficiary's qualified education expenses. Stock investing includes risks, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. S&P 500 index is an unmanaged index and includes a representative sample of large-cap U.S. companies in leading industries. An investment may not be made directly in an index. It is important to keep in mind that investments in fixed income products are subject to liquidity, interest rate, financial inflation risks, and special tax liabilities. Interest may be subject to the alternative minimum tax. 401k benefits may be subject to change at your employer, the governing pension, or benefit organization's discretion. Before investing, carefully consider mutual funds or exchange-traded funds, investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. To obtain a prospectus or summary prospectus which contains this and other information, call your financial advisor. Read the prospectus carefully before investing. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you're required to take a required minimum distribution in the year you convert, you must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. 401k benefits may be subject to change at your employer, the governing pension, or benefit organization's discretion. Variable universal life. The cash value return is not guaranteed. If your investments perform poorly, the cash value will not grow as quickly and it could lose value. Fees are charged for life insurance and investments. There may be surrender charges and penalties for early surrender. Indexed universal life has caps on returns and no guarantees as to the premium amounts or market returns. An IUL insurance policy may be canceled if premium payments stop. Rick Plum is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. Any other individual or company mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with or endorsed by Lucia Capital Group or LPL Financial. LPL Financial Insurance License Number 0518721. LPLIA Insurance License Number 0B91442. Prior to investing in a 529 plan, investors should consider whether the investors or designated beneficiary's home state offers any state tax or other state benefits such as financial aid, scholarship funds, and protection from creditors that are only available for investments in such state's qualified tuition program. Withdrawals used for qualified expenses are federally tax-free. Tax treatment at the state level may vary. Please consult with your tax advisor before investing.